Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most powerful mini PCs that I've ever been able to put together over here on the channel. Now the design is definitely a little unorthodox, but this will breeze through any AAA game that's on the market right now, even up to 1440p in most cases. And with this, we've got Zen 4 cores, and a real dedicated Radeon 7000 series GPU. We're not working with integrated graphics here, and I'll explain how this thing's all put together. But before we get into it, I do want to mention that this video is brought to you by URCD Keys. Now, I've actually been using this site for a long time now. They do offer PC games from Steam, Uplay, Ubisoft. They even offer Microsoft applications like Office, but the main reason that I use the site is for their Windows 10 Pro OEM keys. These are activation keys that you can pick up really cheap, and right now at checkout, if you use code ETA, you can get 30% off, and this 30% discount will be going on until the end of August. So with this discount, you can pick one of these Windows 10 Pro activation keys up for $15.58. And don't forget, you can use PayPal to check out on their website. I just did this build here. I need to activate Windows. I'm going to head over to my updates and security. We're going to go to activation. As you can see, I've got Windows 10 Pro, but it's not activated. So I'm going to change product key. I'm going to paste it in here, choose next, choose activate, and Windows is now activated. We're ready to go. My warning is totally gone, and basically that's it. They'll email your code once your payment is processed, and that's basically it. If you're interested in picking up cheap Windows 10 keys for your new PC builds, I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, so here's the deal. Basically, this mini PC consists of two main components. We've got the Menace Forum UM790, and this has the Ryzen 9 7940HS, which is an absolute beast when it comes to mobile chips. And with this mini PC all by itself, it actually does a pretty decent job. It's got the Radeon 780M iGPU, which allows us to game with some newer stuff really well, but I wanted to add a bit more to it. And of course, we could always use a Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4 eGPU dock connected over USB 4. But what I've done here is added an Oculink adapter in one of the 3 M.2 slots. And luckily, these M.2s do run at PCIe X4 4.0, so we can get the maximum performance out of this external GPU. And it will allow us to do up to 63 gigs a second as opposed to Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4's 40 gigs a second. So we will see much better performance using an Oculink eGPU. You can actually build an Oculink eGPU dock pretty cheap by picking up parts on Amazon. But luckily, GPD recently released their G1 external graphics dock here, and this thing is awesome. I've done a couple videos on it. Up front, we've got our Oculink port. We've also got USB 4, so you can connect this in two different ways. Around back, we've got a lot of I/O, and it's totally self-contained. It's got its own power supply, and it'll do 60-watt PD out. And this mini PC does support PD charging, but we're going to be running this APU at higher than 60 watts, so I'm going to plug it into power also. But remember, I mean, this whole thing could be powered directly from the G1 eGPU. But basically, with this setup, we're only going to be using Oculink. And you can see that M.2 adapter that I have here is sticking straight out of the side. They do make other adapters, but unfortunately, the one I have, which kind of lays flat, looks a little something like this, will not work with this eGPU in this mini PC for some odd reason. But once it's all said and done, it looks something like this. And remember, all of the video is coming out of the eGPU to our external monitor. And when it comes to the overall specs of this setup, for the CPU, we've got that Ryzen 9 7940HS based on Zen 4. We've got 8 cores, 16 threads, up to 5.2 GHz, 32 gigabytes of DDR5 at 5600 MHz. And of course, we've got that AMD Radeon RX 7600 XT. 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM, a base clock of 1500 MHz with a boost up to 2615, and we're running Windows 11 here. Alright, so here it is all set up, and even when it's put together like this, you can see it's definitely a really small setup, but you could separate this if you wanted to. You could have that eGPU under the desk, or however you want to set it up. So far, this thing is performing absolutely amazingly, and real quick, I'll give you a look here. As you can see, we've got that Ryzen 9 7940HS, 8 Zen 4 cores, 16 threads. This is an amazing mobile chip, single and multi-core. RAM is running at 5600 MHz, and I've still got 4 gigs dedicated to the iGPU, but I've disabled the iGPU because we're going to be using the Radeon RX 7600 XT. As we saw, the UM790 mini PC has 2 M.2 slots, and both of them are running at PCIe X4 4.0. So taking a look at GPU-Z, you can see that it is running at those speeds. X4 4.0, and if I was to connect a Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4 eGPU here, it would only be running at PCIe X4 3.0, but that's really not what's making the big difference here with these eGPUs. Oculink is much faster because we've got a maximum bandwidth up to 63 gigs a second, as opposed to Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4's 40 gig a second, and in actual test, I've only seen it go up to around 32 to 33 with an eGPU connected over Thunderbolt or Thunderbolt 4. So the first thing I did here was run a few benchmarks, and first up we've got 3D Mark Night Raid coming in with a 63,667. Checking out Fire Strike, 26,185, definitely getting on up there. And finally we've got Time Spy here, coming in with the 10,068. These are looking absolutely amazing for a mini PC this size, and I know these are synthetic, so now it's time to see how this thing can really game. And the first one we have here is brand new, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, 1440p, high settings, and we can get an average of around 81 FPS. I did try this at very high settings and it kind of fell on its face every once in a while. Not sure if it's because it's a new game and, you know, drivers need to be updated, more optimizations for the game can be had, but it still looks great here at 1440p high settings. Diablo 4, 1440p high settings, over 100 FPS on average, and I had a good feeling that this game was going to work well. Not a super hard one to run, but it's still a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, at these high settings, 1440p, it really looks great. Doom Eternal, 1440p, high settings, we got an average of 151 FPS, not using any kind of resolution scale or anything like that, so we're at a true 1440p. Afterburner up in the top left hand corner, and I also enabled the in-game metrics over in the right hand corner just to show you that we're right there at 1440. And at Ultra 1440p, we got an average of 74 FPS. Really did take a toll on this GPU going from high to Ultra, but it still worked great. I also wanted to test out Horizon Zero Dawn, just using the built-in benchmark, definitely goes over a lot of different scenarios. 1440p, Ultra settings, no resolution scaling, so I'm not using FSR or anything like that. And at the end of this, we had an average of 110 FPS, a maximum of 190, and only a low of 57, so it dropped under 60 just for a second there, but it's fully playable. All of the games we've taken a look at so far were at 1440p, but when it comes to Forza Horizon 5, we can actually run this at 4K Ultra settings. I'm not using any kind of fidelity CAS or FSR with this one either. We got a really impressive average of 95 FPS, and going into this I knew we'd be able to run it at 4K. I figured we'd be in the mid 70s there, especially at Ultra settings, but seeing that we're over 90, really awesome. I definitely wanted to test out Shadow of the Tomb Raider, kind of just use that go-to benchmark there. 1440p, highest settings, we had an average of 79 FPS. And the final game I wanted to test was Cyberpunk 2077. I went with a few different settings here, and first up, we're at high 1440p. This card really does seem to be a 1440p high card or 1080p Ultra. And with it set up like this at 1440p, we had an average of 76 FPS. Some people might want a little more out of it. Obviously, we could drop those settings down, but the best way to get more performance out of this one would be drop that resolution down. So we're going to stay at high settings, but we're going to go to 1080 from 1440. And yeah, this should definitely up that performance by quite a bit. As you can see, we're now up over 100. In fact, we had an average of 116 FPS with this. And taking it down to medium, we could go ahead and lock this at 120 Hz if you wanted to. But I wanted to see if we could actually go up to Ultra at 1080p with this setup. So we'll just head back into the settings. We'll take that preset up to Ultra. And it actually didn't knock us down too far because now we're getting an average of 91 FPS. And when it comes down to it, I don't mind playing these games at 1080p, but as you saw, we could definitely do high 1440 with Cyberpunk 2077. But there's one last thing I wanted to try out here. A little bit of ray tracing. Well, a lot of bit of ray tracing, because we're going to take it up to Ray Tracing Ultra just to see what happens. And I don't have a great feeling about this, even at 1080p, because we are using a Radeon mobile GPU here. I thought it crashed there for a second, but yeah, definitely fell right on its face. We're getting an average of around 38 FPS. So overall, I think it's a great little performer. Definitely not for everybody, and I'm a huge fan of these Oculink eGPUs. I can't wait to see more come to the market. And the fact that we can connect this over USB 4, Thunderbolt 3, or Thunderbolt 4 is just a big plus. It's a dual-use eGPU, and it does work out really well on a lot of different devices that I've tested it with. If you're interested in learning more about the G1 or the Menace Forum UM790, I'll leave some links in the description, but that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you've got any questions or you want to see anything else running on this little machine, just let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.